thing created by AI that showed Kamala Harris, quote unquote, at a Communist Party rally. There was a fake banner using the famous, Uncle Sam wants you to vote for Donald Trump using Taylor Swift. Stephanie, you're there. What do you think the effect of that is in today's world, where so many get their messaging and info from social media?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we've had several weeks where I would say the ground game, the new version of the ground game, which is fought on social media, the Harris campaign had been winning hands down. The memes, all of the things that I'm sure you've talked about many times, certainly in terms of the young people. And I have been struck. I mean, those my colleagues at Bloomberg who are much more kind of knee deep in sort of seeing some of whether it's AI or some of the trolling or some of the attempted kind of negative memes have been struck, at least in the last week. Most of those are failing to gain traction. When you look at how many likes they're getting, how much they're being retweeted. For example, there's been quite a lot of repeated efforts to suggest that Kamala Harris is an alcoholic with, frankly, rather absurd fake photos. They have not gained the kind of traction that you might have feared. But it is clearly, there'll be one of these that does get through, and it just goes to the relatively urgent need, if you're sitting on the Democrat side, to establish your message early, so that people are kind of pre-inoculated. They see this stuff and it just doesn't ring true because they already have an idea in their head of what the campaign represents and who she is. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to play this soundbite, Leslie. It goes to Trump's historic nastiness when it comes to his opponents, particularly women. And this is his daughter-in-law, head of the RNC, talking about Kamala Harris in a very, quote-unquote, trashy way.
It reminds me of, there was this bag that a very famous designer designed. This was several years ago, and it literally was a trash bag, but they sold this thing for like $2,000, thinking that people would actually buy it. It's a similar situation with Kamala Harris.
I mean, it is, in fact, grotesque, that kind of personal ad hominem attack. Do you think the sort of statute of limitations on Trump's nicknames, the nasty words he calls people, even people have said he's losing his sense of humor, do you think that is past its sell-by date now?
No, because this is again, it's an election where people are largely locked in to their candidate, especially people who support Donald Trump. I think the concern, there are very few, we talk about undecided voters, there are very few undecided voters. They're undecided about whether they will vote. And my concern with the deep fakes, with the nastiness, with the rhetoric, is that it might cause concern amongst some voters who would otherwise get out of bed and vote for Kamala Harris. They might decide, not so sure, I'll just stay home. And that, I think, is the real concern. One of the lines that I think is potentially actually the most dangerous is this attempt to frame her as a socialist, as a communist. I have heard in my conversations with what we might call working class Americans, middle class, whose interests are being represented. To the extent that we know Kamala Harris's economic policies, their interests are being represented, and they are concerned that she's, giving away the store for free. So some of that attempt to frame her as a socialist is might work, and that I think is going to be a very tricky and important avenue that the Democrats are going to have to work, is persuading people that you can do things for people, that you can give them, $25,000 towards their first house, and it's not going to tank the economy. That is really a big challenge, I think, going forward.